I'm going to do just a quick walk through the factory because I don't think you guys have seen it as video before. And then I'll take questions or run the conversation however we want. So that was the coffee machine area. The main area of interest is that. And there we've got two assembly lines, one and one. Good morning. And here we just finished building a set of, I think, 110-volt machines. Yeah, the yellow is 110 volt. And this is a smaller run than usual because we're using up the 1.3 parts that we've got. So these are the remaining 1.3 machines. Then we're going to make what we're calling 1.3.1 machines, which are functionally identical, but they're the 1.1 chassis with the 1.3 group head in them. The only difference is this USB port on those machines. This is a 1.3. On the 1.3.1, the USB port's here. It's not as clean as I'd like it, but it's also not as messy as it's been. So that's storage, pallet storage next to the factory. And then next to the assembly lines here. So they're preparing to do another run here. That's what's going on. And we have some mirror panels. These were all from the sample run. We tried, I think in the end, 11 different companies. And that's what we have that we think we can use. But they all have some little scratch defect. But those are all going into D1 XLs to be made. And then that's kind of it for mirror panels for a while. This is what our chassis look like when we get them. So this is what we call a preset chassis because there's some work already on it. USB cable, power plug, fan has been installed. So that's preparatory work. That's where Hannaford sits. And over here, so we've got stations for making different things. And this is where we're making the group head controllers. Okay, that's what a group head looks like so. And once they're done, it's a little bit like a bakery. They go in here, and we have stacks of them. Put it on a rolling table so we can then take it to the assembly line. And so there's Eleanor working away at, looks like testing group heads. Yep, that's what she's doing. So these are fully assembled group heads here, and she's doing a pressure test. That's been set up. I can't actually see where the chip is. Yeah, so she's got a little pressure gauge right there. And she's wiring everything up, checking for leaks. Oops. Checking for leaks. And that's kind of each one gets done that way. Here, this is our flush valve. Do that. These here. And this is an assembly station that has ventilation. So we put the stuff that needs soldering right here so we can suck it out there. So on this side, we're soldering these. This is pump assemblies. This is actually right here. This is a jig that we're in the process of building. So we found that pushing these in here really hurt your fingers at the end of the day. This is something Constantine's doing with some PVC tubing and some wood to try and make this less physically demanding. All right, what's going on here? This is a pneumatic wire wrap machine. It's kind of cool. Basically, what this does is it takes this copper wire and wraps it around something. Now, you do that on the temperature sensors and pressure sensors. Anything that soldering, the heat from soldering could possibly damage. You use this thing. And so it's like a solder, but it basically clamps copper wire around two wires. Then over here, these are what we call auxiliary manifolds. This is the Ultim material, okay, which is a in-body resin. It's a medical resin. And that's what we're making over here. This is a big pile of them. And let me take one out. So there, this is the previous generation, which has clear Ultim, and this stuff is not fiberglass reinforced, which is why it's somewhat clear. What this is doing is, put it there, so you can see, this is our water mixing chamber right here. So water's coming in, there's two temperature probes, then water comes out mixed into here. Underneath, there's a pressure sensor right there. That's what's right there. And then if the water is the right temperature, which we're measuring again, so this is hot and cold, and this is mix. If it's the right temperature, I'll show you on the final machine, but it comes out here for espresso. No, sorry, that's, yeah, that's here for espresso. That's what we would call a flush valve for pressure release. And then here for hot water, here for steam. So that's our main bridge. And then there's also this PCB right here that has all the temperature sensors that go into it, two big cables back to the espresso machine's main computer. Okay. Behind me, Simon is, I think, repairing stuff, which I'm not sure what he's doing. He's been the guy who can build heaters better than anyone else. All right, this is our rack where finished machines go. Basically what we're doing now is we're doing pressure and temperature tests on the line. So here, you can see on the line, these are catering kits, and there's also power. So when we build the machines, after that, we hook up each machine with water, and then power comes from above here into the machine, so water below the electricity. And then over here, I'll show you that. So that is something I just developed in the last few weeks. So these are pressurized portafilters. And this is a temperature sensing portafilter. You can see I have the temperature sensor there, and it's going to this. This is something you guys can totally build. This is $20 to build this, and we put the plans in the diaspora. Same thing for this. This is lightly leaking. I put a little Teflon tape here, and it's supposed to lightly leak so that we can measure ongoing pressure. It's a variac for creating various kinds of voltages. So for example, we can create a 100-volt Japanese current, but mostly we're using this thing now. We've got a bunch of these, which are much fancier because we can create different hertz as well. So hertz and power, anything from 100 to 250. I think this is the engineering pit. If you're wondering why your tablets show up charged, it's because of something I built a couple years ago. These are all charge stations, so all these tablets stay charged after we load them up. And I've now entered sort of the electronic engineer section of assembly. This here is, so this is a whole stack of DC boards. This is the computer. And what I've got right here is a test setup. So Keith, who's a new hire who started this week, this is his desk. And what we're doing is putting every single DC board through this. So a DC board gets plugged in, and this mess of cables is going into this right here. There we go. So the DC board here is being cabled into this, which is anchored in, which is our test board. And essentially what happens is this turns on, all this turns on and does all sorts of logic tests against the DC board. And then if there are any errors, there's these numbers here, there's LEDs next to what happened wrong with the DC board. So we know, is it something we can repair on the board, or is it fatal? Either way, all the lights have to light up in order to use that machine. That here is currently not being used, but this is a high voltage board test. And what that does is it lights up various things. Here are the previous generation heaters, and that's the last of them. That's what's going into the 1.3 machines And this is what takes us so much time, because each of these PC boards, that's all solder. So we're getting PC boards, we're filling it with aerogel, there's sensors and stuff in there, and then that all gets soldered. And to make that so it's a nice tidy box requires a fair amount of skill. So Simon, I think, is down to about an hour each to make those. And here's a machine that's going to get tested. All right, finishing up the tour. That's IT. So here are machines that we are trying to match up to a buyer. So these are either machines that are perfect and they're going straight to someone, or they are used machines on the cheap, decent list. So for example, here on the bottom are a bunch of white D1XLs, and I'm going to be listing those after this call. I think, yeah, that's a 1.0 machine there. That's going to be 40% off the current price there. What's nice is some of these have mirror panels because they're older models when we could still get them. And we do have some D1XLs with mirror panels. I know, so what these are, these with the white group head controller, glass on top with the black group head, these are the new D1 Cafe prototypes, and we only have 10 of them. And what I did is I put the white glass on top here with a white tablet, so it's kind of like zebra colored, so that we can tell that it's the prototypes. Now, what these are D1XLs, but with 4,400 watts of heaters instead of 3,000 watts of heaters. And we're working on the firmware this week to try and give us more steam. So that's what's happening there. Going to be selling some grinders. We only have 6 grinders left, so I'm going to be selling them cheap, cheap, cheap to try and get rid. There's our original E61 that we borrowed that helped us learn about everything in the world of coffee. And this is kind of the empty area now where R&D and admin happens, because people have been moving into the factory to contribute, to help get involved with that. This is getting emptier. I don't know if, yeah, next door is opened. All right, I'm not going to show you the code. And this is our old factory, which is now a warehouse for parts. And those are all suitcases and, gosh, all sorts of stuff. Because trying to ramp up production means getting larger batches of parts, so more space needed. So this was our original space, and if you look at a video, one of our first videos of spilling the beans, you'll see us sitting right here, waiting for IKEA to deliver tables, and that was a little over 5 years ago. And then that was our assembly room. Then we took the space that I just showed you, and about a month ago, we moved in to that, which is doubling each time. So 3,000 to 6,000 to 12,000 square feet. And this is where all the accessories get boxed. So those are all the accessories there. And the boxing happens here. That's Teddy, who takes care of all the final assembly of machines. So once they're electrically tested, he cleans them up, puts the chassis on, anything that's needed. Okay, that's me babbling on for 20 minutes. Your turn. So the idea here was there would be questions and answer. So anyone have some burning questions or just curiosities? Oh, I can turn the chat on. If you don't want to talk, you can just throw questions into the chat. I'm going to do that awkward thing where I don't talk for a bit so that people feel okay asking a question.
I might just start the ball rolling just with a little reporting on the Akaya pairing stuff. I mean, it's just like incredible to be able to kind of have that and be able to play around with it. I think I'm getting some sort of tablet freezing type issues, so I'm going to disconnect it and see what happens with that. But you know, I mean, in terms of the weight measurement and the speed and everything, it's surprising how easily it's all been working and everything. So it's all looking very promising.
There's definitely some sort of tablet slowing down problem with Android 5.1 machines in general. Um, on the two machines that I just showed you, I had two Android 5.1 tablets. The Android 5.1 doesn't give me enough debugging. Like, it doesn't really show me how much memory usage there is. So it was hard for me to see if the app is bloating. So I switched one tablet to 8 and one to 5.1. And the Android 8 tablet isn't bloating. So it's 800 megs, 860 megs this morning after 3 days of staff use, which is, I think it loaded up at 600 something. So that isn't bad. The machine is 2 gigs of RAM, so we're still way out there. But on the 5.1 tablet, I switched to look at total memory use, and it said memory is critically low. And in fact, the tablet was slow. But the decent app was only 800 megs of memory. So I'm like, okay. So I haven't really figured out what's going on there. I think the Android 5.1 tablets are slowing down because of application bloat. That's my guess. As far as Akaya goes, it's possible that there's background processes that are multiplying. The Akaya requires us to do a heartbeat every 3 seconds, or the Akaya turns off.
Yeah.
And you know, the kind of bug you can have is that you have way too many heartbeats running by accident. That would be the kind of problem we have there. So yeah, the latest thing I suggested people do is people who are having slow Akaya tablets, hit remove and see if the problem goes away. If it goes away, then it's definitely associated with the Akaya, not with the tablet. That's all I have to report.
John,
anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
You have any insight as to whether upgrading from 5.1 to 7.0 on the original tablet would improve things or not?
I think it probably would, yeah. The major issue is that Bluetooth on Android just was bad. So 4.2.1, Android 4.2.1 was the first Android that actually had working Bluetooth that wasn't critically broken. And 5.1, they stabilized it, but it's still, as you guys know, if you kill apps, you kill Bluetooth fairly quickly. And even sometimes things like firmware upgrades will blow away the Bluetooth stack on Android 5.1. Then Google came out with Google Watch, and it was Bluetooth. It was their first Bluetooth device, and they realized their Bluetooth was terrible, so they completely rewrote it. Android 7 is their first Bluetooth implementation from scratch, and it's pretty good. It's still not awesome, but it's, I'd say, like 70% of the way. And then Android 8 just seems rock solid. And then after that, Android 9 seems to be working. Android 10, some people can make it work, some not. The trouble is the Android ecology is full of viruses and malware. And so Google has been putting in more and more security features that disable apps being able to do things that they used to be able to do. And depending on whether you can uncheck those or not, kind of will control whether the app will work. So I would say Android 8, 8.1 to 9 is a good choice. And Android 7, I mean, absolutely the app will run faster on the same hardware on Android 7. So if you're not afraid of doing it, it's going to improve your tablet.
No, I've already done it. I just wasn't sure about upgrading to the most recent yet. I'm holding off a little bit. Something seems
Oh, sorry, you've upgraded your 5.1 tablet to 7 already?
Yeah.
And what's performance like?
Just fine. Just fine. It's been great. I haven't tried to weed out any of the large folders or other problems it might have.
Yeah, so the latest app update, it absolutely was the case that when the app started, it would look at the history and do some things with it. It would look to see what your most popular, what shots you made the most in your history. And obviously, if you had thousands of shots in your history, that could take a long time, 20, 30 seconds. So I removed that feature, so the startup should be fast. I also am not doing CSV exports anymore. by default on the history. So a large history shouldn't matter. I didn't really want to move the history or clean it automatically because there are features coming planned that can look at the history and do interesting things with it. So for example, I'd like to be able to look at, 2 years of you making one recipe and maybe plot all the lines. I think that would be super interesting if we could do that. Let me know, guys, if you can't hear me. The noise has started. Sound still okay?
Sounds good.
It's okay here.
Okay, great. Hopefully it's a very front-facing speaker. Just so I've got people are starting to show up. Sound's starting to happen. It is Saturday, so people come a little later, which they're welcome to do. Yes.
John, I had a question about that history. I'm not sure I followed exactly what was slowing things down, but I wondered, is DSV's history folder got anything to do with this, or they're unrelated?
Well, you're talking about Damien's skin. The Damien skin is using the same history as everybody else. I don't know what he's doing with the history. I assume he's not loading it all in memory. And yeah, that's one reason I don't want to erase or purge histories. I want to make sure that Damien or anyone else who does interesting stuff with the history can continue to do so. So, yeah. Sorry, you asked a different question about following the history.
Well, I think listening to what had happened on Diaspora, I actually deleted all but the last 3 weeks of history. Didn't notice any significant change. I'm on 7.1 on an original tablet. So I just wondered whether it was talking about a different history folder or you had a different setup from DSV, or it was using the same files.
Absolutely the same files. And I don't know, had you app updated already when you did that?
Yes, I do that. I just let that happen pretty much as you download them.
So it might be that you already had the improvements I put in to make big history not have any impact. And so you didn't see any impact.
Okay, yeah.
That's my guess. It was, I think for Shin, it was taking 20 seconds to start the app up.
Yeah, it could well have been. There was a bigger delay at some point. And I just never deleted histories until you brought it up and I thought about it.
I'm going to go to the tech stuff, and you guys store. There were some people that put some questions in chat. So Lit Wong has asked, there's a lot of software and firmware improvements coming. Would it be helpful to get volunteers to beta test new firmware and software drops before making it available to all users? So in terms of firmware, that is absolutely what we do. The firmware goes through various stages of beta testing. And typically what we'll do is upload the firmware as a firmware image to Diaspora. And then people who are technical will copy it to their tablet and upload it by hand rather than making it part of the app. We'll do that especially if the firmware has significant changes to it. In terms of the software, I probably need to find, well, not probably, I need to find a better mechanism to have a beta channel. So right now, I'm currently working with Joanna, who did a great job on the Akaya support, and her code style, she mimicked me really well, and the quality of the code was excellent. And so I feel a lot of confidence working with her. So she and I separately have a Basecamp project, because for a long time, God, like 6 months ago, I think Reed Taylor gave me a whole bunch of changes so that his Plucky, which adds Wi-Fi, USB, and a Linux computer that plugs in the back, he had done a ton of changes to make my app work with Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USB, and I just couldn't really face merging them because his level of code was not what I wanted to integrate. And so that was going to be a lot of work for me, and I would be making the app probably very unstable during that time. So what Joanna's taken on is she's gone through all of Reed's code. She understands what he wants to do, and she is rewriting what he's done, but sorry, Reed, she's just a better programmer. And so she's putting things in, and what we're trying to do is essentially daily app updates with very small changes, so that we put them up and we hopefully don't break much. What we did break, and I just posted 15 minutes ago, is firmware updates broke, but the app update, so for 24 hours, firmware updates broke. And that's kind of a level of breaking things that I'm comfortable with, which is to say, you all can make coffee, everything's okay, but some not so often used feature doesn't work, people report it, another app update comes out, and then it's fixed. It's hard for us to get coverage of everything. Now, what we could do is issue patches. I could upload zip files, but historically I found that people don't bother. So those betas don't get tested. Now, what we could do is have a checkbox that says, I want to get betas or beta channel. And certainly there are apps that do that. However, I don't see that making my life any better, because those of you who then subscribe to the beta channel, if you can't make coffee, you're going to scream just as loudly, and we're going to have to jump to fix your bug just as much. So I don't see a beta channel as solving that particular problem. Probably what would make more sense is to tell you what's in the beta, or tell you what's in the current version, and if you go, meh, nothing there I want, then you don't bother upgrading. And those of you who are okay with being guinea pigs, or there's something there that looks like you want it, you grab it. So I think that's probably a better approach. There, I don't have a way to back off. So if you upgrade, I don't have a way to get you to the previous one, unless you made a backup yourself. On the tablet, there is a backup DE1 directory, so you can always go back to the original factory install of the app. So there is that emergency backup. So, Lit, does that answer your question in sufficient detail? I'm going to assume so. Okay. Do we have enough parts, asked Craig, to complete all 1-3 orders? Probably. It's hard to tell exactly, because it turns out the new heaters are not entirely to spec. There's a water inlet tube, instead of being here, is here. With the new 1.4 chassis, that's totally fine, but with the 1.3 chassis, they don't fit without some reworking. So that's why we're using up the 1500 watt heaters that we've used until now. And we've got a certain quantity of 110s and a certain quantity of 220s, and we're just going to make them. And if we have matching orders, then great. If we don't, they will be advertised on the Cheap Decent forum, likely at some sort of minor discount, since they're new 1.3s, nothing wrong with them, and you get them right away. And then any orders that we can't fulfill, maybe 10 of them with 1.3, we will upgrade those people to 1.4 for free. Okay. One thing that mentions, and I think he's right, is there's a lot of software improvements coming. So one of the things I really, really want, because I just don't trust Android and Google, is I would like the app to run fully on normal computers. So right now it runs fine on Mac, Windows, Linux, but it doesn't actually talk to the machine. So that's what Joanna is integrating with Reed's work. We're going to have, so Reed's going to be ramping up production of his Plucky, which has a Linux computer on it, so he can even run the app and then webcast it. So you can use my app through a web browser if you're using Plucky. And we're going to be working on something that simply adds a USB port to the DE1 and none of the rest of Plucky. That will plug into the back, and that will let you plug a USB cable into your Mac or Windows or Linux computer and then work on it directly that way. Ultimately, the goal is next year to try and have Android tablets that have USB direct support. So this tablet I've got here, this is a nice 2560 tablet. It's made by the same people that make our current tablet. But what I like about it is it has DC power in separate from USB. So it will talk to the DE1 over USB while still remaining fully charged. There are some other tablets out there that have that feature. That'll be, might be necessary. The current tablets do not, what's it called, on the go, OTG. Android has this thing called OTG, on the go, which allows you to plug in a USB thing and charge, switch back and forth, but very few tablets support it. It doesn't work that well. You have to switch back and forth. So tablets with separate DC power are a cool way to go. And that will mean we'll break through the 10 times per second data feed restriction that we have with Bluetooth once we have a USB connection. Obviously, that's great for cafes or trade shows where Bluetooth is hell, but it also means that things like firmware updates will be, I don't know, 10 times faster. It means those charts will be a lot smoother. Be nice to have that. So that's why we are kind of breaking the app right now, is we need to make the app do more than just Bluetooth. I'm just going to plug that back in. I'm going to give my voice a break. If anyone has any question, go ahead and ask that. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so JR is asking, how long before you think you're able to start to realize actual speed in machine production? In other words, speed it up. The refurb machines bump to the front of the queue. One last question. Are you seeing an increase in issues as part of the transition to the new machine? Okay, so there's a couple questions there. So firstly, we've just hired a bunch of people. So we went from 18 to 25 people in a month. And we're trying to figure out how those people can integrate well. We're essentially doing a mentoring system where we get someone who's been here for 2 years to pair with someone who's brand new and try to do that. Because the last time we added a lot of people, we did see some defects increase. And that's frustrating, because then frustrating for everyone, clients, us. It's expensive. We haven't seen a defect increase, probably because there's a couple big changes. One is I'm back and I'm here right in the middle of the factory as opposed to in California. Fabrice, who's an R&D engineer but really minds the factory, he's sitting on the other corner of the factory too. And he now, for every machine, does a full 5-minute complete test of everything. So he gets gloves on and pulls every single wire. And we didn't used to do that. So having someone senior there, that seems to have helped. So I haven't seen new problems. We are kind of lucky because there was a bit of a depression here in Hong Kong. First, there was social unrest, and then COVID, and no more tourism. So Hong Kong has been at full employment pretty much permanently. And so hiring, we've just not been able to hire people who with any engineering background. The people who are the two heads, Hannaford is a barista, Eleanor was a housewife. They both now do their job great, but they had to start from zero. And we did suffer from having people who didn't have power tools or tool experience. And so I have some, but I'm no master. But since then, like Constantine, who used to have a company, his own company building amplifiers, he's come on, and his tool mastery is very high. So there's a lot more tools coming in, all German stuff. And then standards for things like torque have been something that have been a problem. All our screws are changing to having Loctite built into them so they don't loosen. Loosening screws during shipping has been a problem for us. Everything's changing from Phillips to, what's it called? Pentalobe, I think it's called. And that gets rid of stripping, because that your head really locks in there, and then you don't have stripped heads. So all those little changes have increase the quality. There's other things. So, for example, a lot of the cables, if you open up your D1, you'll see these rainbow cables that we then cover with another sheath. Just as we have more brain power and more skilled people, those things are getting swapped out. So those are replacing next week with cables that have heavy duty insulation already wrapped around them. So the pace of change is quite dramatic, especially on the quality side, because I really need to get processes down and a lot less handwork. So as you can see from the tables here, there's tubing there, but that station is not yet set up for water. So that got wired up like 5 days ago. We had one table that has water. We didn't have enough. We only had 4 110 transformers. So the new process I had for testing couldn't scale. But what I really like about doing the new processes is that I am doing it in an open way. In other words, I'm creating new profiles, documenting how they work, what tools we use, and then documenting them for you guys. So any tests, pressure calibration, flow calibration, as well as stress tests, leak tests, all that you guys can do too if you have any worries or you want to recalibrate. Ray just finished the design for what's called a BeagleBone, which is like a very open Linux configuration. It's a BeagleBone computer that allows you to do everything from it. And that's going to be what we call the Puppet Master, because it pulls the strings of the D1. And that's going to be a completely open hardware spec. We will probably sell those boards as well. I was talking to Reed Taylor, who is looking at that as a kind of plucky version 2. It isn't this big anymore. It's now this big. But it can talk to the outside world in a way that's kind of interesting. So you can add foot pedals and controllers and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I wouldn't say that we have a lot of speed increase yet. Probably, probably that 27% speed increase, 20% of that is working Saturday. Definitely getting the refurbished machines repaired is the opposite direction, right? That slows us down. It's slower to repair a 1.0 machine than it is to build a 1.3 machine. Anyway, I think we only have three machines to repair right now, down to about 20. And then refurb machines, are refurb machines bumped to the front of the queue? No, so refurb machines do not appear on the queue. When I get so anyone who's bought a machine and looking at decentespresso.com/queue is looking at a perfect new machine. If you're interested in a refurb machine, please send me a message through any of the social media channels, and I'll put you on the Basecamp project called Cheap Decent. There's about 600 people on that right now. I think there are 6 or 7 machines that are going to drop today on there that are all refurbs. And those range from being full price because there's no buyer. So we built slightly too many D1 XLs. Actually, what happened is a number of D1 XL customers decided to go from 1.3 to 1.4. Because we made them wait so long because we had the part shortages, we upgraded everyone from 1.3 to 1.4 for free who wanted to get one. So it's like an extra 2 months to get a 1.4. So we've got some of those. And then there are 5% discounted brand new 1.3s. I mean, and that's because they have there's a little dot somewhere. It's barely a defect. And then all the way down to 1.0 machines that are 40% off the current machine price. So I think I have 2 of those appearing. There's a bunch of 1.1 machines appearing today, and those are 28% discounted, I think. Don't quote me on that. I have to do those numbers later today. And so those go to the queue. Sorry, those don't go to the queue. Those go to the Cheap Decent group where someone says, I'll take it, and that's that. If someone is on the queue to receive a new machine and they want a refurb, first of all, you have priority. So you get to cut in line in front of everyone else. And secondly, if you take a refurb, we refund you the price difference. So anyone who's bought a machine who decides they want a refurb to get a machine right away is no problem. You guys are first in line. Oh, and then the last question from JR. Are we seeing an increase in issues as part of transition to the new machine? I wouldn't say it's increase in issues, it's a change in issues. As I mentioned, let's see if I have got, I don't see one of the new heaters around. But I'll show you with this. The issue we've got, and it's just a small one, but the D1 is, a pretty compact little machine. This little piece of metal, this is a stainless steel tube, and it ends with that. On the new ones, this is varying from this to this. And obviously when it's over here, it's now interfering with the thing next to it. So we can take a metal tube, and take it and bend it. Same thing down here. So there's a bit of interference, but anything with that? I think what's going on with 1.4. We don't know. We actually haven't built a 1.4 machine yet. We're still waiting for a few more parts. So we're doing some assembly work. There's so little different. I think the only thing that we haven't been able to test in production is the new power supply going from 35 watts to 60. That takes a new bracket. And once we have that bracket, by the way, that bracket was designed so it should work fine in 1.0 and 1.1 machines. So anyone who wants the higher wattage power supply, you can get it. On that note, actually, there are a bunch of cases now where Ray is able to measure the current usage with that electrical clamp that's in the machine. And he can detect when there's enough available power for us to operate the catering kit or the plumbing kit. So currently, if you run out of water, the machine goes filling water. And there's going to be a firmware drop, not right away, it's going to be probably a couple months, but we're going to start having cases where we can refill water in the background while you're working. So an example would be, I don't know if we'll be able to do it with a pour over, but with steam, I think we can do, for example. So while you're steaming, we can fill the tank up. The idea is to get rid of any pauses that we have. I think with the 35 watt power supply, well, I know so, we're not going to be able to have background refilling in every case. So there'll be times when you end espresso. Espresso, for example, uses a lot of power. When you end espresso and then it fills the tank up. Not that big a deal because you have to knock the puck out and clean your portafilter. But with the 60 watt power supply, we'll be able to do background refilling at all times. There is also some, besides the firmware, there's going to be some new tablet setting that I have to program so that those of you who upgrade your 1.1 machine can say, I have the bigger power supply now. Any questions before I read the next one? Okay. So what's the backwards compatibility with the USB Bluetooth hardware that I just mentioned? It is full backward compatibility. And let me grab Plucky. All right, I am going to move my laptop. There is a D1 right next to me, big surprise. And if you take your back panel off, you will find this blinking thing, okay? That right there is a little chip about yay big, and there's a socket there. And the reason this is all metal and that's open is when you turn your machine off, you can just take that right out. And that is what, if I open it up, this is what Plucky does, okay? Plucky is the same shape as that thing. So you take that out, you plug this in, and then inside here, there is where the Bluetooth goes. So this thing works with all D1s, and the new hardware we're talking about will be, if we manage to pull it off, it's R&D, will be much, much smaller because this has a computer in it. right? This has a full Linux computer, which gives a lot of interesting stuff. What we're working on is a super dumb version of this, essentially a little board this big that will have a micro USB plug on it, and then you plug your Bluetooth on top of it. So it makes a little sandwich. That will give you USB and Bluetooth just at the same time. That's all it does. And that will work all the way back to 1.0. And I probably should explain, I think I've explained before, but the reason this is exposed is because my experience with old devices, and I've got lots of them that work with computers or tablets, is that like I had a treadmill, and the treadmill worked with a computer, but it used a RS-232 port, which is who has that still? And so it doesn't really work anymore. So what we did is we made it so that the espresso machine has a high-speed serial port to this, and this is actually a computer. This is an Arduino targetable self-standing computer. And you can buy this exact thing. In fact, we did for many years, and then the company went bust. But you can buy that with Wi-Fi built in, which is cool. But there'll also be new companies coming out with new Bluetooth chips, like Bluetooth 5, or who knows what. In this case, we wanted to add USB. We can, because the computer inside here has a high-speed serial port to this, and then this is a computer that then talks to the outside world. So if in 3, 4, 5 years, Bluetooth 4 just is obsolete, no one's using it, this is like a $30 part. And we can just make a new one, you guys pull it out, put a new one in, and you've got the latest communications protocols, whatever that is. So that was something from the very beginning, so to avoid obsolescence of the espresso machine, is to make sure that we could upgrade communications. All right.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there, John?
Sure.
When you mentioned this small dumb version of Plucky that you're going to make for the back, and there's going to be a USB port, does that mean you'd be plugging the cable into the back of the machine?
So I don't know yet, is the quick answer. Ideally, we would be able to take that USB charge port that's in the front of the machine and make that charge and data. That would be ideal. Another possibility would be to give you a new plastic back panel that would have a USB port plugs on it. I don't know. For the time being, it's going to be a dangly thing as we figure that out. But obviously, it needs to be something that doesn't break. So there's a new question, which is once there's USB control, will we have real-time control like we have on the group head controller? So will this ever be available with firmware app changes? So the short answer is yes. I will probably not program it because I've got other things to do, but we will be adding a Bluetooth command that gives you the ability to change pressure and flow while the shot's running. Now, the reason that's not there now is that if you do that and you do this with your finger, you're going to have like 30 seconds of where the flow is slowing down based on all the events you just caused, because Bluetooth can't handle it. And also your chart is going to have dropouts because you've now caused more events, right? The chart is coming in at 10 times a second. If I make a whole bunch of events at 10 times per second, the chart is dead, right? Which also means if your shot is supposed to end on weight or volume and you swipe, you've now killed the data feed and your shot's not going to end. So this is why I am not programming real-time control over Bluetooth, because it's a whole world of bugs that I'm going to cause. However, we will make the API available. So in other words, the Bluetooth command will be there, and anyone who wants to write that as an extension or a skin, you know, the 1.0 real-time controller skin, cool. If you go and use that over Bluetooth and you experience a numbing amount of bugs, I don't want to know about it. If you use it on USB and you have a bunch of bugs, I probably don't want to know about it, because we made the group head controller for that reason. But you can talk to the person who's working on the skin. And in theory, it should work, right? In theory, with a high-speed interface that doesn't have collisions, we should be able to give you real-time control on the tablet. So I did actually years ago, if you look at the code, there's something called airplane mode. And what airplane mode was, is there's an accelerometer in this. And what you can do if you enable airplane mode is you lift the tablet off the machine like this. And now as you're flying, you control whatever the current thing is. So this would be speed up the shot. This would be slow down the shot. And it worked surprisingly well, except for the Bluetooth issues. That's kind of cool. And that code is already there to do that.
John, just to follow up on that question, in your estimation, would you anticipate problems with the version 1 with a USB bus, or do you think that's likely to work just fine? I understand the issues with Bluetooth and would never anticipate that, but with USB, are you thinking it would work, or really your personal view is there'd be just bugs and it's not going to happen?
So there's nothing. Are you talking about the real-time control or just USB?
Yes. No, the real-time control.
Okay. Yeah. So just to answer the question you didn't ask, I don't foresee any problems with 1.0 using USB normally.
Okay.
I don't see any issue there. And probably the charts, actually, I don't know if the tablet can handle 20, 30 times per second screen updates, nor do I know if that's all that useful. And no, I don't anticipate problems. So I think that real-time control over USB should work, even on 1.0 machines. There's nothing different between a 1.0 and a 1.1 machine as far as this is concerned, or 1.3. I mean, you should be able to do airplane mode on any of our machines over USB. That should work. I just don't think it's a super good use of my time.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for that.
But we're getting more and more technical users. I think in the last few months, we've seen I think it's as a result of COVID, we've seen the audience for the machine change from being coffee specialists to being people interested in technology. And suddenly the number of programmers and technologists on Diaspora has hugely increased. And I frankly think that this is like a really good home project, right? Because we introduced the new command for real-time control. It's just set pressure, set flow. And I mean, the code's already there. You just change airplane mode to true and it'll actually start working. But it might be buggy, or they might want to make it so airplane mode is like flow this way and pressure this way. I don't know. Or use a camera so they can move their finger up in the air. All that stuff is cool. And it's kind of a fun project for people not employed by Decent, because in a weekend you can bang something up, and if it doesn't work, you just disable it. So that's one of the reasons I want to get the extension mechanism working, so that this could be not part of a skin, but just a feature that could be available, right? So airplane mode, moving the tablet like this, could work in all skins as an extension.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Hey, John, I'm not a computer programming type guy, but one thought I did have was, so we've got this tablet and it's got a camera on it. Could someone write something so that the camera can like detect motion, and if it does, it turns the machine on?
Yeah. So totally, and that's easy. And I've even looked at code that does that. So, however, it's also creepy.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that was an idea I had years ago, and there is absolutely code that does that. The other one was sound. It just listens for the morning sounds of movement, of stuff happening. But absolutely, if you move by the camera, the machine can wake up. And the only thing with UL compliance is we can't turn burning water on, but everything else we're allowed to do with the tablet. So we absolutely can wake it up and warm it up. So, I mean, you could also like take a yellow ping pong ball and, pressure like this, and that would be super easy to track on the camera. And there is front and rear facing. So I had thought about originally you put your drink on the top of the espresso machine, and it just happens the camera is actually, since it's angled like this, is actually able to take a picture of your shot. But I think I could think of better uses for cloud storage than 100,000 latte art photos. Wait, that already exists.
Luca, you clearly want a Minority Report routine, don't you?
Yeah, what I really want is like a machine where you hold up the label of the coffee to the camera, and then it reads it and tells you, yeah, you bought bad coffee.
So I have a working library that reads barcodes inside from the camera, and that works quite well. It reads every barcode out there, and you just hold it up like that. So if we got people to put barcodes on coffee, and then that number would then look up on a database and, I don't know, fill in the fact that you're using that coffee at least into your metadata. That's not hard.
Yeah, the coffee notes app type thing, I think, is something that I don't know that anyone's really come up with a good coffee notes taking app system. I mean, I think there's like Tasteify and some of them, but you've like something like that where we could integrate our shot assessment data on top of our shot extraction data would be really cool.
That's why I really like the tablet.
Yeah.
Because it had an integrated keyboard, and what's kind of cool is it does that. So, and that beeping sound is a machine having failed the HiPot installation test. So every single machine has to have that test. We test it twice, actually, before we do any burn-in, and then after all the burn-in calibration, we test it again. And that can be, for example, so that's, forget, like 20,000 volts or something insane. And essentially, if there's any insulation that's not all the way where it should be, it'll leak, and that's a fail. So I agree with you. I've looked at a bunch of coffee note apps. That's a hard problem. If you look at the way the internet's gone in terms of ratings and feedback, it's been much more look at what users do rather than ask them things. And so if we can have some smarts looking at what shots they're making and infer things from that, then we actually have real data. I imagine that I think we have more machines with Google than any other company, for example. And I think they know something about big data there. So figuring out how to get that data out of our tablets, someplace where people can start playing, and that's someone trying to fix the HiPot test, and they didn't. Yeah. That would be cool. All right. Anything else, guys?
John, I think you mentioned a while back that Zubing was working on a bunch of different steam tips. Mm-hmm. How's he going? I quite liked his multi-hole steam tip.
Yeah, so he has the latest firmware from me, the one that I have here. He's the only other person who's got it, which uses both heaters. So all you guys are just using the steam heater currently, and just full power on that. The new firmware is power sharing between the hot water heater and the steam heater. and heating to 95 Celsius and then 160 in the second stage. He's very happy with that new firmware with his blade. So I think I showed it in some video, but you can imagine, right? If anyone's ever pressure washed anything, a blade like that is very common. I'm not a big fan of a tip where steam comes out the sides. I find it really easy to make big bubbles. I like most of the steam to go down, and his 3-hole thing mostly goes down like that. As we increase our steam power, and those of you in the 220 to 240 world are going to see the biggest increases, we need to enlarge the holes on the steam wand tip. Now we can do that by just making 1 hole bigger, or 3 holes, or a blade, and you know, those of you know the forced tamper, you know, the guy is very scientific about it. So he has a bunch of ideas. He actually wants to redesign our steam wand completely, and he's got the expertise to do it. So that's great. So someone's asked if we are still doing vibration shaking tests as part of every run. So I just stopped that about 10 days ago. And the reason is we went back through the logs, and it's been about a year and a half since the machine had a problem due to the shaking test overnight. So we just don't have that anymore. So what we're doing now is for every 40 machines that we have, we take 9 machines and we put that on the shaking machine. And if any of those machines have a problem, then we'll shake all 40. But otherwise, we're not shaking every machine. And we are pretty sure that what the shaking machine did is it showed that our locking connectors were not locking very well. And that was because we were buying locking connectors without really like looking at the different specifications of them. So the electrical wiring connectors have a spring on them, but there's different designs. There's springs like this, there's that, and there's different tolerances. And the shaking machine was showing us that maybe 1 in 20 would come off, the spring would shake off. So we switched to a quite expensive cabling company called BMA. If you Google BMA Hong Kong, you'll see them, and they're a high-end cable company. Basically, our cables went from being 30 cents each to like $1.80 each. So huge increase in cost. But we were able to specify every single damn thing. So we actually have a weighing machine now, and we put a 20-pound weight on those locks. It's a spring in order to test that they lock and don't ever fail. So, so long answer, we don't use the shaking in the machine on every espresso machine anymore because it found everything that was a weakness, and we've just gone after every single one. The tea portafilter. So I bought the tea portafilter. I'll go grab it. I'm really, really liking it. I'm very surprised. I'm trying to convince Scott Ray. I'll explain why. All right, I'm back. Sorry for the wait. So here is the portafilter that I bought from the manufacturer. It's a Chinese manufacturer, and this is their design. There's at least 2 designs. Now it turns out that our regular portafilter manufacturer makes a knockoff, basically. They didn't design this, but they make portafilters for the biggest espresso machine company that you know of. And they also make for us. And their quality is very good. So the fact that they make a tea portafilter is interesting, and I've ordered, I think I've ordered a few of them. And let me explain why I'm not shipping it right away. And the reason is, I talked to Scott Rayo and I said, any interest in this? And he said, not really. So this is what it looks like. And I said, okay, why not? He said, well, because pressure tends to bring out bitterness in tea, and percolation is not a good way to extract tea. I said, okay, well, a couple things. One is, if you put this in a regular espresso machine, there's a spring in here with a ball that creates 4 bar of pressure, and you are running water through at 4 bar. You make tea, but it tastes bad. So percolation is an extraction technique of running water through materials. Okay? And that's how we make espresso. And it doesn't work well, he says, with tea. Instead, what you want to do is let the water sit on the tea. Now, it just so happens, and it was not intentional by the design of this portafilter manufacturer, that this thing with a spring is a 4 bar on-off valve. Now, they didn't think of it that way. What it does is it's a spring that opens up at 4 bar, but they turn it on at their espresso machine, create 4 bar pressure, and just water gushes out. So you can make bitter tea that way. Now, a Taiwanese espresso machine company, Pro for cafes, makes a 2-group machine that uses these things, but they have a special program that turns on and off. So they're still doing 9 bar. But what they do, and you can watch the video on Diaspora, they turn on 9 bar, then they stop, and then they sit for like 30 seconds, and then it's 9 bar, water flushes out, stop, and then 9 bar, off you go. And they make a tea, I think it was like a minute, 10 minute, 20 seconds. And apparently it tastes good, right? Hard to tell because it's bubble tea, they're putting sugar and milk into it. So I don't know, but that's how they're doing it. Now, I made a recipe, which is now part of the tablet app, which uses this in a way that was never meant to be used. And what I do is I use this as a valve that I can turn on or off at will by going to 4 bar. So what I do is I'm not making percolated tea. I'm putting water in high speed. I think it's 6 mils per second, takes like 6 seconds to fill up. And then as soon as I have pressure, which is to say this is filled half bar, I turn the water off. Okay, wait 40 seconds, then 4 bars to flush this out, and I think 12 seconds, and then stop again. And I make 4 brews. So each brew has the minimum amount of percolation possible, and long holds, and the tea is tasting so much better than kettle tea. I can't tell you. So I'm actually making a higher concentration tea than I normally like. So I drink British tea bags, but I don't add sugar or milk. So I'm actually tasting the tea. I'm drinking them stronger than I ever have, and there's just no bitterness. They're really good. And my milk teas for bugs are also stronger and are tasting just way better. So that's got me quite excited. Now, the reason I'm not shipping yet is that this spring right here, we can change the spring and make this ball, I think, open at lower pressure. And the reason I want to do that is because Rayo's saying pressure is the enemy of tea. And so what we want to do is try and make this here open at something like 1 bar, so that we could sit at half bar and then go to 1 bar to open it and then back to half bar. I don't know if that's going to work, right? When I put a 1 bar spring in here, it might be that it leaks. It might not seal correctly. But the current supplier of portafilters said we can put whatever you want in here. However, they are really expensive. They're twice the price of the other company. I think because they're the famous portafilter maker. But you know, they're making a knockoff of this, so it's kind of galling that they're charging twice as much. So I'm going to test it and see if it's worth it. But I'm also talking to these people this is pure stainless steel. This isn't chromed or anything. It's really high quality. It's got a nice screen in it, spring. I mean, I have no problems with the quality of this thing. And it means I can sell this for like, I was thinking $120, whereas the other one is going to be like 150, 160 because it's the famous portafilter vendor. And if I can keep the price down and the quality is equal or better. So the only thing I don't like about this is I'd like the spring to be weaker, and I don't think I can get this changed now, but this is kind of flat on top here as opposed to a basket that's rounded. And that means that the seal needs a little bit more tightening to be made without leaking. And I suspect that the one from the famous portafilter vendor is going to have the same problem because they actually haven't thought through anything. They've just made a copy of this. So we'll just have to live with that for now and have to make a tight seal. And in the future, get this mold. This is a stainless steel mold. This is probably like $25,000, $30,000 to make the mold that does this thing. So I'm not going to spend that, not right now. But it'd be nice to have this have a round lip so that it locks with less pressure. We are going to have to do something with this. I'll show you. These are M10, which is great. So it is compatible with ours. However, this is slightly smaller than ours, and they have this little sheet that they use over that to hide the difference in size. So we're gonna have to make custom portafilter handles to mate that perfectly. Or what I did previously is I took like that and I mated it this way, and that worked too. Anyway, long way of saying, I don't know, 3 weeks. I think I'll have this sorted out in about 3 weeks. I'll know what we're gonna do. But the tea portafilter is just, it's making such good tea. If I can get the pressure down, then maybe I can get Rayo interested. One of the people who contacted me is the admin or owner of a major tea forum, and he's super interested. I talked to Ray because this guy suggested that we would want to be able to go to higher pressures and higher temperatures. So he's not agreeing with Rayo. He'd like to go to 4 bar and go to 120 Celsius. And so he thinks that's going to make good tea. And he's another tea expert. I don't know. So I think we can go to 105 Celsius without a problem, maybe even 110. 120, we start to get a little uncomfortable because we don't want to soften anything inside the machine. The Ultim is rated at 180 Celsius, and we're currently far from that. So we're going to go very slowly to higher temperatures, but there'll be some tea research possible with more than 100 Celsius brewing possibilities as something people can experiment with.
John, could you just make a spring-loaded valve to screw onto the existing spouted portafilters in place of a spout?
So you can't, and I'll get you one that I've done that actually does that. So no, I can't get it for you, but I'll show you why it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So here's a double spouted portafilter. And if I create pressure here, what happens is I get leaking right here. Okay. Now we solve that sort of by putting an O-ring. We got a massive O-ring that we put here, which jammed in between these two things, but it doesn't work very well. So if you want to create pressure here, you have to have it seal against the portafilter, not against the basket. You can take the basket out, right, and seal against the portafilter, but it's not made for that. And so you have to rotate like almost at 3 p.m. to get it to lock. It doesn't lock very well. So you have to make a portafilter where it goes higher than the wings, which if you look here, you'll see that's exactly what they've done. They've made the portafilter go up higher than the wings. So yeah, that would have been nice, but it doesn't work.
Well, or could you just build it into a basket then?
Yes.
And then run it through a blind filter?
Yes. So we totally could take a blind basket and punch a hole in it and then put a valve a spring-loaded valve on that, or we could just buy something off the shelf that works really well. You know, I have to ask, why did this cost $25,000 to cast? Why did they do that? And no one likes to spend money. So it might be that making a basket with a valve was an R&D dead end for whatever reason. Sounds like it should work.
I guess my question with that is, it looks like it's got the mesh screen built into the bottom for filtration.
Yes, it does.
And so it's like, what do you do if that clogs up?
Oh, it's there's a spring right here.
Oh, so you can remove it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, this spring pops right out, and then the mesh comes out.
Cool.
So, and then of course, if we did a basket, we'd have to basically put a filter on top of this with a spring there, because you can't put a spring. The spring has to be under the tee. Right, which is what they've done here. So, I think what they've done is good. You know, it's working. They're extremely popular chain of cafes in Taiwan using these things commercially. Also, this thing here, if you ever have a jam, this screws right off and the whole thing just pulls out. So it's really easy to clean.
Cool. And what's the volume that you brew in each of your like brewing pulses or brewing cycles?
So probably about 60 mils. Because I'm ending up with 238 in the cup, and there's 4 brew cycles.
So it's sort of like what do they call it? Like the Gaiwan.
Exactly. So there's a Chinese tradition of a really tiny little tea brewing vessel, and you pour the water in, and then you drink that 1 cup and you let it sit, and each brew has a different taste to it, and the Chinese will often throw out the first brew. And I haven't experimented yet with trying to flush out the first brew out the flush valve. Someone suggested that. That would work with this, because this has got a 4-bar valve on it. So we could do like 2-bar water and just put water in and open the flush valve. So water, raise to 2-bar, flush out. Water, that. Do that like 3 times really fast, and that will get most of the tea out. And that would be neat as an option if you've got a tea where you actually need to throw that first brew out. And then you don't have to move the cup out. Otherwise, obviously, you can do it with the current recipe. You just hit start, you wait 30 seconds, you watch it flush into the drip tray, then you put your cup in. But I'm drinking way more tea because it's tasting better, but also I just put some tea in, hit start, come back in 3 minutes. And the tea tastes great, but also I didn't have to do a kettle and clean up. And it's nice also to just knock out loose tea into the portafilter, into the knockbox. Okay. If no other questions, then I am going to get on my day, and you guys can get on with your probably evenings, except for Australians. You have your day too. All right.
Cool. Thanks, John. That was good fun, and great to sort of see around the factory and everything as well.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for coming. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John.